And New Zealand concluded a free trade agreement on the 22nd of December, a deal both sides are calling historic, not just for what it covers, but for how quickly it came together. After nearly a decade-long pause, negotiations resumed in the month of March this year, and in just 9 months, the two countries sealed an agreement aimed at deepening economic ties, opening up markets, and reshaping how businesses, professionals and students move between these two nations. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi and New Zealand's Prime Minister Christopher Luxon announced the breakthrough after a telephonic conversation, calling the pact mutually beneficial and reflective of strong political will. Remember, talks were formally launched during New Zealand's Prime Minister Christopher Luxon's visit to India in the month of March this year, and officials say that the agreement is likely to be signed within 3 months, with implementation expected next year. So what does this deal actually do? For New Zealand, the big takeaway is deeper access to India's massive consumer market, the world's largest population, and an economy projected to touch $7 trillion by the year 2030. Under the agreement, tariffs will be reduced or eliminated on about 95% of New Zealand's exports to India, with more than half of them becoming duty-free from day one. Prime Minister Luxon says the deal could add $1.1 to $1.3 billion a year to New Zealand's exports over the next 2 decades, particularly in dairy, fresh fruits, wool and wine. For India, the gains are less about milk and more about mobility and services. This FTA places a strong emphasis on services trade, a core strength of India's economy. New Zealand has offered its most ambitious services package ever, covering 118 service sectors and MFN, or Most Favoured Nation treatment, across 139 subsectors, including IT, education, telecom, tourism, construction, and professional services. The agreement also includes major mobility provisions. Indian students will get post-study work visas of up to 3 years for STEM graduates and 4 years for PhD scholars with no numerical caps. A new temporary employment pathway allows 5,000 Indian professionals annually, along with 1,000 working holiday visas every year. In short, this deal is not just about goods crossing borders, it's about skills, services, and people. Now, beyond tariffs, the India-New Zealand Free Trade Agreement opens up several new growth avenues. New Zealand has committed to facilitate investments worth $20 billion into India over the next 15 years, a move expected to support manufacturing, agriculture, and allied sectors. In agriculture, New Zealand will help set up centres of excellence for apples, kiwi fruit, and honey, aimed at improving productivity, technology adoption, and farmer incomes. For India's manufacturing sector, this deal brings duty-free access to key raw materials like wooden logs, coking coal, and metal waste and scrap, helping reduce input costs and improve competitiveness. The agreement also widens cooperation in areas ranging from fisheries, culture, and forestry to audio-visual tourism, horticulture, and traditional knowledge systems. Crucially, the free trade agreement goes beyond the tariff cuts with provisions to address non-tariff barriers through stronger regulatory cooperation. Remember, bilateral merchandise trade touched $1.3 billion in the financial year 2024-25, while total trade in goods and services stood at around $2.4 billion, with services alone contributing $1.24 billion, highlighting why services and investment are central to this pact. However, the India-New Zealand Pact must be seen in a wider context, as it is one link in a chain of trade agreements that India has concluded in the recent years to expand market access, boost services exports, and secure a stronger position in global supply chains. It is India's third major trade agreement concluded this year and part of a much larger trade push under the Modi government. Let's now look at these trade agreements to see how India's trade map has steadily evolved over the years. In the year 2021, it was the India-Mauritius CECPA. India's modern FTA journey began in February 2021 with the India-Mauritius Comprehensive Economic Cooperation and Partnership Agreement, India's first trade pact with an African nation. This was a limited but strategic deal covering goods, services, rules of origin, mobility, and financial services. India gained preferential access for over 300 export items, while Mauritius secured access for over 600 products into India. Crucially, Indian service providers gained access to over 100 subsectors spanning IT, finance, education, healthcare, tourism, and professional services. A clear early signal of India's services-first approach. In February 2022, India signed the UAE CEPA, its first major trade agreement in a decade. Tariffs were eliminated on over 97% of Indian exports, benefiting gems and jewelry, textiles, pharmaceuticals, leather, and auto components. Trade surged, nearly doubling to over $83.5 billion by financial year 2024. The UAE deal became a template, fast, deep, and focused on trade plus services. Later that year, in December 2022, India signed the Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement with Australia. This deal aligned two natural partners, Australia's minerals and agriculture, with India's services and manufacturing strength. It also strengthened mobility, diaspora ties, and Indo-Pacific strategic cooperation. In 2024-25, the EFTA, a European breakthrough. In March 2024, India signed the Trade and Economic Partnership Agreement with EFTA nations, Switzerland, Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein. The deal came into force in October 2025 and marked India's first free trade agreement with developed European economies. EFTA nations committed $100 billion in investment and 1 million direct jobs over 15 years, the first binding investment pledge in any Indian free trade agreement. Services exports gained through digital trade, professional mobility, and mutual recognition of qualifications. In July 2025, India and the UK signed the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement. The UK granted duty-free access to 99% of Indian exports, including labor-intensive sectors like textiles, leather, gems, and toys, a major win for medium and small enterprises and job creation in India. Services were front and center again. Indian exports of services to the UK already stood at nearly $20 billion, and CETA eased mobility for IT professionals, healthcare workers, educators, and finance experts. One major gain is the Double Contribution Convention, which means Indian firms and workers will save over 4,000 crore rupees by avoiding double social security payments. Now, just days ago, on the 18th of December, India signed a CEPA with Oman. Oman granted duty-free access on over 98% of tariff lines, covering nearly all Indian exports. India liberalized tariffs on about 78% of its imports from Oman. Beyond goods, the deal boosts services and labor mobility, strengthening India's footprint in the Gulf. So, what does all of this mean? Well, when you look at these deals together, a clear pattern emerges. India is no longer signing trade agreements just to cut import duties. The focus is now on services, skilled mobility, jobs, investment commitments, global supply chain integration. The India-New Zealand Free Trade Agreement fits squarely into this strategy. Smaller in trade volumes, but high impact in people-to-people and service linkages. As talks continue with the US and the European Union, India's message is consistent. Trade deals are no longer transactional, they are strategic. And with 7 major free trade agreements concluded in just a few years, India is steadily rewriting its role in the global trade order, not as a passive market, but as a country that helps set the terms of engagement.